Thank you for joining me for another episode of Keeping It Real with America's Supermom. I am excited to have my next guest. We are actually connecting for the first time. I have Lesley Evans here, and I am excited to get into some great conversation. As we are approaching the holidays, it's all about being intentional, thinking about ways that we can practice mindfulness, amongst other things, to help us stay not so overwhelmed, being able to fully be present and embrace the time that we have, creating memories with family and friends, and sometimes with some of our business clients. So, before we get into all that, I want to give Lesley the opportunity to introduce herself.
Well, you did such a wonderful job introducing me, Lachelle. My name is Lesley Evans, and a little bit about me. I am a registered psychiatric nurse therapist by training and have been for the last 30 years, a long time.
Hmm.
And I also have really practiced my mindfulness and spirituality in really looking into the and connecting with the alternative and Akashic records and really about purpose and
Mm,
about finding our whys and our purpose and why we're here in the world.
I love
Uh,
that.
yeah, yeah. And so I blended both of those together because I really feel like we have this thought that it either has to be science or it has to be spiritual.
Mm,
And for me, they meld together just beautifully. And it's
hmm.
about taking the best of both of those worlds and putting them together to help people to be present, less overwhelm, more joy, more purpose,
Hmm.
more productivity.
I love that. Now, first, I'm like, what is the secret? Because you're saying doing this for 30 years. I'm like, let me see that birth certificate. 'Cause to be practicing for 30 years. So I'm like, hey, I'm really excited about the secret to being youthful and looking that way after such a I don't know when it comes to dealing with mindset. So many of us struggle with the limiting beliefs, and I know just on my own journey, I struggled with depression for 13 years and I was hospitalized 3 times, and a lot of the core of that were the beliefs that just didn't serve me and kept me on this roller coaster of up and down with depression. So working in that field for that amount of time, I just want to say hats off to you for one. And what are some small things or practical ways that you could really tell the audience, especially now during this time, that they could work on doing that could help them kind of start that journey with being more present and mindful?
Right. Well, there's a few things. There's three things I always kind of go back to that I recommend
Hmm.
for people and busy people.
Hmm.
And busy, I would say women especially, who often, not always, are kind of take on the bulk of the responsibility with families,
Hmm.
which is changing over time, which I love to see,
Hmm.
but still is there a lot. Is that the first thing is that learning to take small steps and appreciating those small steps. And especially, you would know with going on that journey with depression, is
Hmm.
that the small steps over time are really what bring you from that state to be able to get back into life. And I
Hmm.
think we often think, oh, but that's too small a step. I'm not doing enough. And to be able to give yourself grace along the way, because it is the small steps that get you where you want to go. So breaking things down smaller would be a big thing. If you feel stuck or you can't take that next step, break it down smaller. Break it
Hmm.
down even smaller. And I don't know if you've seen that picture where there's two ladders. One has really small rungs and one has big spaces in between the
Oh, yeah, I
rungs.
hadn't seen that.
Yeah, and so the one person with the small spaces between the rungs is about three-quarters up the ladder, and the
Mm,
other person with the big spaces is still sitting there trying to reach for the first step. So it
mm.
really is a good visual for those small steps. So that's number one that I would definitely recommend. Don't feel that any step is too small. A step forward is important, and just keeping those small steps.
I love that because, for me, the one of the first things that really stopped me from that overwhelm, it was making up my bed every day and having a clean sink, so it would
Yeah,
be like, okay, if I've got a house full of chores to do, as long as the sink is clean, that's what I'm concerned about. So I picked
right.
one thing, and that's kind of what helped me kind of get myself back to a place of control and not feeling like everything was sending me in this tailspin. So I love that you talk about the small steps. And what would be a way that people can break that down? Because you brought up a key thing. People say that, oh, this is not really of value because it's too small. It's not
Right.
even worth doing. So, how do they know how to break that down? Because, we're like a lot of those people on that ladder trying to get to that first step. And
Right.
yeah, so how do we know what to break it down to? What are some ways we can do that?
So let me just give you a nice example that I like to use. So if you've had either a dinner party or just a really busy week and your kitchen is full of dishes, using your example of knowing that the sink was clean,
Mm-hmm.
and you walk into your kitchen and all you see is stuff everywhere. And sometimes that first thought is like, this is too overwhelming. And all you want to do is walk out and go sit down and not deal with it because it's too
Mm-hmm.
big,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, and that's common. I don't, when I have a kitchen like that, it's like, I do not want to deal with this. But if I don't deal with it, it's just going to get bigger.
Mhm.
So it's about really figuring out, where do I start, rather than thinking about where the finish line is.
Mm.
So where do I start? Well, I can, and it really depends on sort of how you work. You can either break it down. Well, if I just do this corner of the kitchen,
Mhm.
I'll just start here.
Mhm.
And then once I'm done that corner, then I can decide whether I do this corner. So it's as literal as just taking a piece of whatever the step is. Or it might be, I'm going to just work on this for 5 minutes. That's what I think I can handle. So after
Mhm.
5 minutes, if I feel like I can do some more, I'll do some more. But 5 minutes. So giving yourself a time limit is also another way just to get that small step. You don't have to be in there for the next 2 hours.
Mhm.
So it really is about what you're seeing in front of you, looking at that whole thing, and just taking, you can even break it down the steps that need to be done and then just choose one. So it
I
could
love that.
be, yeah, it could be, I'm just going to empty the bottom of the dishwasher first.
Mhm.
And then you do that, and then you can go sit, or you can empty the top.
Mhm. That's
And
good stuff.
right. And so it
Mhm.
really is and it sounds very simple, and it is simple. When you're overwhelmed, it feels big.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
just break it down. Take some breaths, bring that overwhelm down, break it down. What's my first step?
Mhm. I love that. And I think, something with taking that step gives you momentum. I think I have learned so much about breaking things down that it helps me to prevent the overwhelm in the future. So it's like, okay, if your dishes or your kitchen, I mean, your sink is full of dishes, part of that overwhelm is maybe they were sitting. So maybe you have a certain boundary that you set. Hey, when you get done with your dish, rinse it out, sit it on the counter. So then if it does accumulate, it's not accumulating in the same way that it did before. So many
Exactly.
things I was able to learn with tackling some of those hard things that helped me to say, how can I prevent this from happening again? What are some things that I could put in place? Because, when we had like as many as 7 or 8 kids to get ready for school every day, It's like, look, you're going to get your shoes and socks together the night before, your lunch is packed. Whatever we could do before that morning works so much easier, and having that set of standards, because you've been on the other side where people have been late or can't find something when you're trying to go out the door.
Right. And so there's two things I hear from that, Michelle. It is having grace with yourself to
Mhm.
learn from what you've gone through and to learn from what works. And it's
Mhm.
also asking for help,
Yeah.
which
That's a
is
big
a challenging thing to do, isn't it? Sometimes. But saying, you know what, I can't take care of this all myself. If you could just rinse your dish and put it
Mhm.
aside, or if you can just make sure your socks and your shoes are ready for the morning, and that just takes something off my plate.
Mhm. I love that. And,
Yeah.
I think that's really a challenge for many people, is understanding what they need help with. And I love how you say to break it down, because if you break it down, then in the event that someone is willing to come alongside you and help you. And I think this is another thing, is recognizing that people may not come alongside you if you don't have the ability to ask. Because if they see you actively doing something, it's like, okay, she's already doing it. What do I need help for?
Exactly, exactly. And there are so many people willing to help
Mm-hmm.
if you just ask.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people that have been there, that would understand exactly the overwhelm that you're going through, that would say, absolutely, I'm happy to help.
Mm-hmm. So how do we get past that feeling? I know for me, I struggle with a lot in silence, because I was a high achiever, only child, felt that asking for help was a sign of weakness. What are some ways that we can kind of reframe that, so we can ask for help and not feel that, um, I don't know, just that anxiety, or feeling that,
Mhm.
something's wrong, or we're weak or whatever, for asking for help?
Yeah, this is a challenge, I think, for a lot of people. And I know I had the same challenge. And so there's a couple of things I want to, a couple of points with this. The first one is starting small. So
Mhm.
don't start with, can you help me figure out all my finances? Start with, can you help me pick out your socks?
Mm.
Can you help me get this thing off the top shelf that I shouldn't be climbing on three shelves to get? I'm only 5 feet tall, so
Me too.
that's very relevant, right?
5'5" to the 5 feet. Okay. Don't
five
you
feet
love
and a half
video?
inch.
People think I'm so much taller when they meet me in person. They're like, "Where are you?"
Yeah, exactly. And so, how many times have I climbed up a shelf and tried to get that top thing when there's
Mhm.
somebody right there that I could just say, do you think you could reach that for me, please?
Mhm.
So, starting with small things just to get used to asking for help and find out it's not as painful as we think. And then you
That's
can start moving into the next things and build from that.
that is great advice. I love
Hmm.
that. Now,
Hmm.
so what are some things that you do? I mean, practicing for 30 years with this field, what are some things that you do every day that just kind of helps you stay in that mindset to always be able to help others in this way?
So here's the thing, and this goes flows beautifully into my second point, is that being of service does
Mm.
not mean self-sacrifice.
Love that.
Being of service does
Writing that
not
down.
mean self-sacrifice. We have this thought, a lot of us have this thought that if we are not sacrificing ourselves, that we're not truly being of service. And that is the opposite of the truth.
Mhm.
In fact, for us to be of service in a way that is out of love is for us to show that love to ourselves and to
Mhm.
take care of ourselves. So we're not being of service from a point of resentment
Mm.
or responsibility. We
Mhm.
are of service from love. rather than
Mm.
that. And it's a different kind of service, and people feel that difference.
Mhm. I love
And
it. My mom, she would say this, quote all the time: "You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm."
that is absolutely true, because
Mm,
as soon as you burn out, they don't have fire anymore. They haven't learned how to keep themselves warm,
right.
right? And
Mhm.
so it is so important that we take time for ourselves and doing the things that fill us,
Mhm.
so that we can be at our best for not only us but the people that we love, and the things that we love to do, because nobody can be at their best when they're depleted.
Mm.
And I often say, you wouldn't get into a car at one end of the country and expect your car to drive to the other end of the country without filling up with gas.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, when the gas gauge starts to dip, you pull into a gas station and you fill up. So
Mhm.
why do we expect that out of ourselves,
Very good. That's
right?
good stuff. Mhm.
So it's really important to take care of yourself. And so I've learned that lesson. I've learned it the hard way.
Mhm.
Um, in sacrificing myself and having to make a lot of changes to get
Mhm.
myself back on track. Um,
Mhm.
and the other piece of that is, and I'll say, I often share the story that I sacrificed. I had a checklist, got married, graduated from nursing, got a job in public health, got a house, had three beautiful girls, all of that stuff. And as I kept checking that off, I started to lose myself in that process. And I
Mhm.
was so busy taking care of everyone else around me and, working public health system, you take care of more, that I lost myself. And I was having a conversation with my eldest daughter. She was 16 at the time, and it was about a boy, which often it is.
Mhm.
And she was losing herself, or not doing the things that she loved to do to try and keep this relationship going. She'd stopped singing. She wasn't showing up to dance as much. She was not being who she truly it was,
Mhm.
to try and make this boy happy. And I remember giving her the motherly advice: if somebody doesn't appreciate you the way you are, then they aren't for you, and you should always be confident in who you are and do those things that you love. Never give those up. And what happened with that conversation is a light bulb went off for me, and I thought, what am I teaching my girls?
Mhm.
What am I modeling for them by always taking care of everybody else and not myself?
Mhm.
And it was a huge moment, because I don't want them to live a life of self-sacrifice. I want them to
Right.
be fully fulfilled and living their purpose and being inspired. And I wasn't showing that to them.
Mhm.
And so, yes, that brought about a whole lot of changes for me in
Yeah.
life, and brought me to where I am today, which I'm very grateful for
Mhm.
in the end. So, yeah, it's
I
what.
love that.
Mhm.
Now, so for, and I appreciate that transparency because I think a lot of people hear certain things, but they just don't understand what that means. It's kind of like you just don't know what you don't know. I could
Mhm.
talk about depression and people who have been there, they understand exactly what I'm talking about. But other people, it's like, okay, just smile, just do whatever, and it'll get better. And saying some of these cliche things, not really understanding. So for people who are watching, and we're talking about not self-sacrificing, what are some ways, and you kind of alluded to it with your daughter about how she stopped doing the things that really were a part of who she was, her personality and character. But a lot of us kind of begin to gradually have this happen to us, and oftentimes, as you mentioned, it is with women. You start out with motherhood, and it's like, oh, you have the baby and it's cute, and eventually it consumes who you are and you forget, people don't
Mhm.
remember your name. You're like, "Oh, that's Sally's mom," or somebody else's
Yeah.
mom. You become the mom of your kids rather than even people addressing you by name. So, what are some ways or some signs that people can kind of start saying, "Uh-oh, let me make sure that I'm checking in with who I am and not in that mode of self-sacrifice."
Right. I really think that some of those signs are some of the red flags are that feeling of overwhelm, like we
Mhm.
talked about,
Mhm.
that you're always going and you're always going for everyone else, and you've got endless lists and
Mhm.
things that you need to do. You've got to be here for this person or for that person, or and so that would be a huge red flag to me, and saying, oh, okay, I need to step back and see, why am I so overwhelmed and why am I so busy? The second thing is that you start to resent. That
Mm.
resentment starts to build up, frustration, sometimes anger,
Mhm.
of always having to be there for everyone else and nobody being there for you.
Mhm.
uh, and not understanding that it's actually you that have created that piece by always being available to everyone and not asking for anything. So
Mhm.
that resentment is another real big red flag that says, "Oh, I gotta step back and look. What am I doing for myself? Am I doing this out of love? Am I doing this out of
Mhm.
duty?" Those kinds of things are two big ones. And you said it yourself. Depression is the other piece that can come in there when you're
Mhm.
feeling overloaded or you're not taking care of yourself. Um, so those feelings, those low mood, depression,
Mhm.
and just having a hard time even moving sometimes, even
Mhm.
getting out of bed.
Mhm.
um, so those are some biggies that can say to you, you know what, it's time to take a look at what's going on here and take some time to take care of myself. Guilt. Oh
Mhm.
my goodness, we carry a whole lot of guilt doing something for ourselves. So that may happen when you start taking care of yourself. Is that there's this guilty piece that comes on there and you feel like you have to be available on your phone. I know I've lived it.
Mhm.
So, and your phone is right there just in case somebody needs you. So it's really about also working through those feelings of guilt and reframing it that for you to be there for your people in the way you want to be, it is important that you do things to take care of yourself, things that you
Mhm.
love.
Mhm.
So reframing that is really, really important.
I love that. That's one of the pillars of my Fresh Start program, and Fresh is an acronym, and R is reframe. And I think that can be a game changer because, one of the things that kind of had me on the cycle with these hospitalizations is, you would do something, it would last for a certain time, and then you go back to your same pattern. You would do
Mm-hmm.
something different, and then it would last, and then you go back to the same pattern. And so, for me, the reframe was not totally discounting my past. Often we have it where, oh, I'm a new person. We're just going to forget about last year and start anew. And it's like it's this skeleton that's in the background that, you're afraid people are going to talk about. But when you reframe, you're able to take the lessons from that, talk about it from a place of empowerment, and really move forward in a way that serves you rather than feeling like, oh, it's this glooming shadow that you're afraid to talk about or somebody's going to bring up. So I love that you mentioned reframe. So, what are some ways that people can kind of begin that journey of a reframe? Because I mean, I think it's really important, and it's a key thing that really helped me to blend my old life of, everything that I used to do to what I do now in a way that there is no guilt, negative feelings, or anything about it. It's more using that whole experience to educate other people and
Mhm.
empower them. So for somebody who's watching and we're talking about reframing, they're like, how do I even get started with that?
Right. Well, I mean, reframe is so these are all learnable skills, which
Mm-hmm.
is the lovely thing about it. So, the thing with skills is with any skill, it takes practice
Mm-hmm.
to start to be able to incorporate more and for it to come more naturally. So, the first thing I would say is giving yourself grace.
Mm-hmm.
We are all on this journey learning and trying to figure things out. We're human, we make mistakes, we go back to old coping habits when things get hard. That's part of the journey. And
Mm-hmm.
so being able to give ourselves grace, I think, is really important. And when you see yourself, like you said, I would start and it would be great because I knew I had this thing, and then it would, kind of go back. And so to not look at that when you go back to those old coping skills as a full relapse, but
Mm-hmm.
saying, okay, uh, I like to call them lapses. This was a term that a colleague of mine used. It's a lapse, it's not a relapse.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about saying, okay, I caught myself using those old skills. Okay, what do I want to do next? So, not being hard on yourself, because what can happen is when you start to be hard on yourself for going back to those old coping skills, it brings more heaviness on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes it even harder to walk forward because not only have you gone back to those old coping skills, you're also being hard on yourself about that. See, I told you you couldn't do it, da 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 da, all those terrible things that we tell ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
looking back on it, and you can start to look at, okay, where did things change? What was happening? Where did I start to change from those healthy habits that I was incorporating? And then what did I learn? So when I look at thinking about, there's a couple of stories that I can use. But if I look at an exercise program, so I've started an exercise program, I don't know, like 20 times in my life. Because I know it's healthy for me. And
Right.
so, I get all the stuff together, get my program, whatever I'm going to do, get my shoes, get all that together, my timeline, and that kind of thing. But what I've learned is that before I can start an exercise program, it's really important for me to start taking care of myself, so my skin,
Mm-hmm.
because that makes it easier to take the next step in self care. And then for me, the next step is starting to take care of what I'm eating, so what I'm putting in my body, drinking more water. And then I know once I've done those steps, then it's easier to take the next step into getting that exercise going. So
Mm-hmm.
even though I've kind of gone away from the exercise, I've also learned the things that are important to bring me back into that again.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, once I know my kitchen sink is clean, then I know I can take the next steps.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that you learned along the way, when you're feeling like you don't want to do all that. That's an important first step to be able to take you.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of being hard on ourselves for not keeping up with those things we know are healthy, give ourselves grace. And I know, okay, I want to get back on track. What do I know helps me? And so taking those, and again, it goes back down to those small steps,
Love that. That's good stuff.
right?
Yeah. Mhm. And I love the
And
whole thing, I think so often we, think that it is just like this overnight transformation, you know? I mean, so much we lose in looking at these highlight reels. We just think, oh, life is a bed of roses, everything works out. And so when we really have real life issues, we begin to think something's wrong with us because those are the things that people don't talk about. They don't talk about the real life, they highlight the good points
yeah,
and we believe that's gonna happen every day. A lot of people with their businesses, they're like, been in business for a while and they just get to the point where they give up because they have this mindset from looking at advertisements, highlight reels, that everything is perfect. And that segment of really being transparent and knowing the true things that are going on behind the scenes really kind of gives them a tainted view of what reality really is.
It's exactly it.
Mhm.
Most businesses took a lot of years to even get established,
Mhm.
right? If we're using that example, yet the advertisements that you see talk about them after they've been established, because
Mhm.
most times they can't afford the advertisement when they're trying to get established. So it
So,
took them time, right?
yes, so true.
So it took them time to be able to get to that point to be established. And you're right, it's about that comparison and
Mhm.
just again about giving yourself grace along the way. To
Mhm.
know that life has ups and downs. That is part of life. There is
Mhm.
no way around that. In that sometimes we're going to have low mood, sometimes we're going to have some anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, but you can get through it. You can get
Yeah.
through it
Mhm.
using simple tools. Sometimes maybe you need a little bit of help from somebody who knows how to help you. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's time.
Mhm.
And just, putting those healthy habits back into place that you knew helped you before.
Mhm.
And always giving each other grace too. There's so much heaviness in the world right now
Mhm.
that we're all feeling, and we're all just trying to figure it all out, and just having
Mhm.
grace with ourselves and each other is so important.
So important. So, I could go on with this topic forever. I
Mm,
can't believe we're almost out of time. But, I guess just for the last question is thinking about, um, when it comes to self care, what are some things that we can kind of begin to adopt, especially now it's the holidays and
yeah,
going into a new year that can help us with giving ourselves that grace and just on that journey of being more mindful, being
right, right.
present, especially during this time.
So here's a few little tidbits that I can give you. So often when people hear the word mindfulness, they hear meditation or taking time
Mhm.
out or having to add something more to your list. And for
Mhm.
me, when you're overwhelmed, that is just too much to even think about. So I like to talk about adding mindfulness to things you're already doing. So being present in things you're already doing. So things like walking. And this isn't like going out and taking a walk. This is walking from your car to an appointment or
Mm.
from the bathroom to the kitchen. We walk every day. And I call
Mhm.
them transition steps.
Mhm.
And using those instead of letting your mind run about all the hundreds of things that you need to do or the appointment you're going to next and worrying about that, really slowing your mind down and focusing on what you're doing when you're walking. So how amazing your muscles are to
Mhm.
move, to keep you balanced. The feeling of your arms swaying, the breeze coming in on your face while you're moving, really sinking in. And I'm sorry, the sun is just coming right in this spot
Look,
here.
your future's so bright, girl. You got to wear shades.
So it's really about really being in that moment. And what can happen is your thoughts can still kind of take you because your brain is used to thinking in that way and using that time to do those what ifs and worries. So when those what ifs come up,
Mhm.
acknowledge it. Okay, thank you for letting me know about that worry. Right now I want to focus on my walking and using almost like a conveyor belt and let that thought pass
Mm.
through and fall off and go back to focusing on your walking. So it's stuff you're already doing, and it could
Mhm.
be just 30 seconds. It doesn't matter. Take those moments just to be still in your mind. And I
Mm.
and I promise the more you do that, the more effective you'll be, and the less you'll feel that overwhelm. And there's one more example I'm going to give you that most people love. If you're a
Mhm.
coffee drinker or a tea drinker, but I'll use coffee because more people are coffee drinkers than tea drinkers. I'm a tea
Mm.
drinker, but
Me too.
yeah, if you think about coffee and making the coffee. So if you are, feeling a little overwhelmed, or you're in the morning and you're getting your coffee ready, you watch the water go in the coffee maker. You hear it get poured into the coffee maker. When you open up your coffee grounds, you see them and you have that smell that comes up as you put them into the filter. You watch that, and then you hear the water,
Mhm.
percolate through and drip in. And as that happens, the smell of the coffee comes up. As you pull the coffee out, you watch it swirl into your cup, and the cup feels warm against your hands. And as you bring it up to your mouth, you feel the warmth on your mouth. And then the taste of it tastes different at the front of your mouth than it does at the back.
Mhm.
And then feeling the warmth slow down. So it's really about, I like saying, being one with your coffee. So even
Mhm.
for those few minutes, just really focusing on, with all your senses, on drinking that cup of coffee or that
Mm.
cup of tea or your favorite snack, whatever it is. Just take a few minutes just to really be in the moment with that. And that can just give you just that little break that you need to stop those
Mm.
thoughts from going and going and going and overwhelming you.
I
So
love that.
yeah, it really is amazing what it can do.
Mhm.
And the coffee drinkers out there right now going, oh, I haven't drank my coffee like that in so long. I've forgotten how wonderful it is, right?
Isn't that true?
Yeah,
But they remember it when, if they're in this routine of drinking it every day, of
yeah,
not having it. You know what I mean? So you go out
exactly.
of the house without your coffee or go somewhere with that routine being interrupted, it definitely puts a different spin on the day, I think.
Right, right. So just taking that little bit of time just to slow your
Mhm.
thoughts down and just,
Mhm.
be with whatever, having a meal with your children
Mhm.
can be chaos at times.
Mhm.
However, it is it is more amazing when you make yourself fully present
Mhm.
in that meal.
Mhm.
Um, and often, when we're at work or business, we feel guilty for not being with our kids or our families, and so
Mhm.
we're taking all those texts and then, checking on them and make sure everybody's okay while we're at work. And then when we come home, we feel guilty because we took so much of our work time to take care of family. And
Mhm.
then we lose that time with our family because we're thinking about all the things we didn't do at work.
Mhm.
And so we're losing on both ends in
Right.
that thing. So it's really about being present at work or in your business,
Mhm.
present at home, and
Mhm.
really listening to those conversations that are going on, um, with your kids, with your spouse, your partner, really being present and being intentional
Mhm. Mhm.
about that are just ways that we can start living life slower. We're not getting less done. In fact,
Mhm.
we're getting more done because we're in a
Right.
better space.
Mhm.
Um, but being intentional about being fully present as much as you can is so important, and it's important to your kids and to your relationships as well.
Mhm. So true. And I'm just all for, there is no perfect balance with, work and family and everything else that's going on. It's about someone said it to me one day about keeping everything in harmony. And I think that is so much better to really think about because, one day you may spend 5 hours at work and the rest of the time with family. One day you may need to do 10 hours of work and just have this ebb and flow. So I think I love what you're saying about that because it's so true. We kind of stop ourselves in our tracks because we have these unrealistic expectations and believing that everything is gonna line up that way, and it just always doesn't.
Nope. It does
Mhm.
not. Life has ups and downs and ebbs and flows, just like you said, and so it's about, allowing that a bit more, and allowing
Mhm.
that you're going to have tough days, and
Mhm.
also knowing on those tough days your presence is as important as on the days when you're feeling great.
Mhm.
Work and kids and partners, they all get value from your presence in all ways, whether you're feeling up or whether you're feeling a little bit tired and overwhelmed. Your presence is always valued.
Mhm. That's good stuff. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Now,
And
so what is Oh, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, I think it's really important for our kids also to know that we aren't perfect people.
Yes.
Because I don't want my kids to grow up thinking they need to be perfect. And so it's really important on our bad days, not that we, totally fall apart or anything, but just to
Mhm.
say, I'm having a bit of a tough day today. And so I'm working on that. It's a good
Mhm.
thing for your kids to know that, or that sometimes
Mhm.
you cry,
So
because we
true.
want them to be able to know that they can cry too.
That is so important, I think, because, oftentimes our kids are measuring up to this ideal state, and that's how they see us until, we really let them in on, hey, although this is how you're seeing it, this is really what's happening. And, I have explained that to my kids in so many different areas. And, it really helps for a better situation. And I just think a healthy set of expectations for themselves, because
Exactly.
if they see you as quote unquote perfect, and then they're thinking that they can accomplish perfection. So that is definitely a great point. Well, we see that, technology definitely has this way of showing up with some challenges every once in a while. So it looks like her connection might have been interrupted, but some great, great, great insight. I hope you guys got a lot from this interview about being present and intentional. And I think one of the best takeaways that I could say is the whole concept of just adding some mindfulness into what you're doing already. Walking, right? Walking simply from your bedroom to your kitchen, or kitchen to the bedroom to the car. All these different things are so important when it comes to moving forward in the presence of being mindful. So I hope you all have really enjoyed this conversation with Lesley. And if you have any questions, which you may, because she said some good stuff. I think another thing is, to be of service doesn't mean that you have to self sacrifice. So I am going to bring her back on really quickly so that she can kind of give us some of her final thoughts. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. But here we are with Lesley again with her final thoughts.
Hello, my apologies. My computer just shut
No
down on me.
problem.
Aren't we just talking about having a little grace with ourselves? So I'm going to allow myself a little bit of that grace. Thank you for bringing me back in here.
Hmm.
My final thoughts are really be gentle on yourself as you're learning
Hmm.
new ways and new things in life. That is part of the journey, and really remember that being of service is not about sacrificing everything you are. In fact, it's the opposite. It's
Hmm.
about taking care of yourself so you can be at the best for the people that you love and for your passions and purpose. And honestly, being of service from a place of love is a way better feeling for you and for the people that you are helping.
Hmm.
And right. And then the last thing, fit in those little pockets of mindfulness and things that you're already doing. It doesn't have to be an added thing to your list. You're walking, you're eating, you're having coffee, spending time with your family. All of those things are ways that you can find ways to be present and mindful and in the
Mhm.
moment and slowing down those thoughts. So those are my three biggies. Um, and I would, if anyone would love to have a chat with me or an Akashic reading, I'm always, I do have a 20-minute free reading for anybody that's
Mhm.
listening if they'd like to take advantage of that, and just chat about sort of some of the steps to take right now to start you moving forward. I would
Awesome.
love that. Yeah, so I'll make sure that Michelle has the link so that you can get into that.
Awesome. Well, this has just been a great conversation, and I am so grateful that you were able to, we've had a lot of little snafus this week. So I appreciate your flexibility and just it's just been a great conversation and some great, great takeaways. So I want to thank you so much for your time. And for those of you that are watching, again, if you have any questions, if you would like to take this conversation a little further, feel free to reach out to Lesley and be sure to leave us some questions or any kind of insight in the comments. We will be sure to pass that on to her as well. So, again, thank you so much, Lesley. And we definitely may have to have you come back in 2022. I think being mindful, present, and intentional is something that we always could use some work on. I don't think that's like a one-stop shop.
I
So
agree.
definitely would love to have you come back again to kind of make sure that we are staying present, with some of these practices for ourselves.
I would absolutely love that, Michelle. And this has truly been my honor. I love chatting about just really about making our lives just a little bit better, a little
Mhm.
bit more on purpose, and a lot less guilt in that process.
Love that. Well, thank you again. And we want to thank you guys all for watching. And we will see you all on the next episode. Bye for now.